G'day guys, Hundit. My name is Wildkard. Thank you for watching the Wildkard Rugby Show. I guess this is the Wildcard MMA show, and you're probably watching this because you're a South African, you're not having a good weekend, and yeah, sorry guys, this is not the weekend for any of you, and another disappointing result for the nation. Dricus Du Plessis lost the UFC Undisputed Middleweight Championship to Chimaev, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Now, a lot of you guys talk to me in the comments and tell me that I should talk about the UFC. I used to do UFC a lot when UFC was first coming up as a popular sport, and I used to train in no-gi Jiu-Jitsu, a bit of striking, but mostly Jiu-Jitsu because it actually helped me a lot with my tackling when it comes to playing rugby as well. So I actually did a fair bit of grappling, know a bit about submission, and then I watched a lot of UFC since UFC 79. And that was champion versus champion between Rampage Jackson and Dan Henderson. And recently, I have to be really frank with you, I haven't been watching much UFC since UFC did a little bit of shenanigans with Brock Lesnar and Mike Hunt in that UFC 200, late surprise. Like some kind of, it was like some kind of WWE stipulation, right? The surprise opponent for Mike Hunt, and then it was like revealed to be Brock Lesnar on the day, and then Lesnar showed out looking juicy as the orange juice in my fridge, and ended up being tested positive after the fight. So after that, I lost a lot of faith in the UFC. But hey, the sport is still very, very popular, and some of you guys still want me to talk about it. And yeah, I thought weighing on this particular fight, when it comes to fighting, it is one of the things where it's a bit of rock paper scissors, and you wanted to knowing that if you knowing your weakness, like say if you're a scissors, you want to avoid the rock at all costs, or figure out a way to mitigate the rock, and that is like literally a huge part of the fighting game, the mixed martial art game, is to figure out your advantage versus the opposition's disadvantage, and try to figure out ways to minimize your disadvantage and then assert your dominance in your advantage areas. Now there was, the UFC also kind of goes in a bit of a cycles between grapplers, wrestlers, and then stand-up strikers, and then every now and then a very powerful good striker comes along like Anderson Silva, who is also a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, by the way. It just leaves people with a bit of a, bit of a double-edged sword, right? If you stand up with him, you're gonna get knocked out, and if you wrestle with him, you're gonna get submitted. And then he kind of goes in this cycle of wrestlers and strikers, and then eventually you have this sort of dominance that is being that's asserted by one fighter, and then that dominance leads to like a bit of a change in the upcoming stars to a different style, and then he kind of moves around like that a little bit. And the UFC middleweight division has been very, very dominant in terms of strikers and grapplers, and not many submission kind of wrestlers has been in the division for quite some time. Israel Adesanya was a very, very, very good striker, and he's almost had that Anderson Silva style where he's quite good on the ground. But he didn't want it to be wrestling you on the ground. He wanted to strike you because that's where he's definitely the biggest advantage lies, right? And then he did everything he could to avoid the locking out, to avoid getting taken down. The sprawl game from Israel Adesanya was probably like the biggest thing that he worked outside the ring, other than his striking. To make sure that it doesn't get taken down, make sure that the opposition don't close the gap and get the double leg on him, to keep that range, and that's why he was so dominant for so long, and that has led to a cycle where people coming up to the fighting are all strikers. You've got Robert Whittaker, who also kind of like striker, grappler sort of thing, not really a submission specialist, and then coming into Du Plessis, also a striker. And just being fit, being like, athletically, and I guess you could call it, athletically, and being much fitter than a lot of his oppositions to assert that dominance over the opposition with that, grappling style. But there's no way, shape, or form any of these fighters are a submission specialist. And tonight we saw basically what happens when a submission specialist finds this way, gets the close up the gap, and then when it looked like to me, and I apologize if you don't agree, Du Plessis failed to prepare for that sprawl game to prevent the takedowns. It was to me, based on my, by my training and my experience, the sprawl should be the only thing Du Plessis is working on in this, like working on for the entire leading into this fight, and it just didn't look like he had it. And then that's number one. Number two, when he was taken down, you generally you have to have a way, like a plan, a game plan of getting out of this, getting out of it as quickly as getting out of the takedown as quickly as possible. And he just did not look like to me Du Plessis had any sort of game plan that definitively can get him out of the side control that he almost seems to be relinquishing immediately upon taking down. So he didn't even get into the guard when he was taken down. He just gave up his guard, and immediately ended up in side control, and then the crucifix, and then even though you can argue that how do you say his last game? Yeah, Chimaev wasn't doing much damage, but the fact that he's in the crucifix is such an overwhelmingly dominant position. The referee was no way the referee was going to stand you up. If Du Plessis was going to try just tie up the opposition and hope for a stand up, he needed to be in full guard, which he failed to do again and again and again with every takedown, right? Like in this situation here, even just this shot here, when this is happening, he failed the sprawl already. The next thing you know, like if you're a jiu-jitsu guy, you will know if you fail the sprawl, the next default for him should be wrapping his leg around and go for the guard and pull guard, right? Essentially pull guard, wrap his leg around and pull guard and try to tie him up. He just didn't do it at all. And that tells me that he didn't really prepare for this. Even in this situation, he should be pulling guard, and he just didn't do that at all for the entire fight. I think there was maybe one right at the end on the 5th round where he got a stand up from, actually ended up in a guard position, but he just didn't do that at all. And that was probably the most surprising part when I watched this, just the lack of preparation when it comes to a game plan that he should know, right? Like everybody can look at the Wikipedia that not only that he's got Chimaev, not only that he's got a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but he literally fights out of Dubai, Abu Dhabi, right? Like it's like world famous for Jiu-Jitsu submission competition. Like he's literally fighting out of there as well. And for Du Plessis, just really didn't prepare for that. Was I'm a little bit confused, and I'm a little bit disappointed to be really frank with you. When they were standing for the brief moments, Du Plessis definitely looked like the more dangerous guy. To be really frank with you, so he obviously focused on that a lot, but he just did not have any response to that takedown at all. And this was almost like watching Randy Couture beating up Tim Sylvia at UFC 69, and that was just wasn't too much of too much damage, but it's just constant grinding, constant pounding on the ground, either pinned against the cage or being in side control for the entire 5 rounds. Another thing I did notice is Du Plessis, he was a little bit reluctant to let go, even if he was in a really bad position, right? Like say he was in God, how do you say his name? Chimaev was only side control. Even when he was in side control with his arm like locked up in the crucifix, he's reluctant to create space to try to escape. He was holding on to try to tie him up for a stand-up, and the referee wasn't doing it because he is such a poor position. There's no way referee's gonna stand you up whilst in side control. So he wasn't doing anything to try to get himself out of it by creating space. It was closing space to minimize damage, which again tells me that there is a risk when you try to create space to end up in the full mount, and then end up in an even worse position than you were before. But that's the game of wrestling. That's the game of jiu-jitsu. Like you have to give up space to create space for yourself to get yourself out of the position. It's a bit of a risk and reward. And if you just tie the opposition up, you're not gonna get punched as hard, but you're never gonna get out, right? So, and that's the game of jiu-jitsu, and it just showed to me that he was reluctant to play the jiu-jitsu game. He knew that he was out of the depths for jiu-jitsu, so he just didn't want to play the jiu-jitsu game. He didn't really try at all. And even Danny, I think it was Cormier on the commentary was pointing out, he should have grabbed, like, the wrist control was non-existent. He should be when there were points where he was pinned against the cage and Chimaev had back control on him, and he should have just grabbed the wrist and then controlled the wrist control, and he just didn't do any of that. He was just, he didn't really do any of that control. Whether or not he didn't know or he didn't think it was, or for whatever reason, he just didn't do it. Like, it was just, again, shows like he's just a lack of control, lack of jiu-jitsu training in preparation going into this fight. So I'm a little bit disappointed to see this, and it was not a very exciting fight by any stretch imaginable. It was very, very stale. But you can't, like, the thing is, Du Plessis didn't really have to, be really frank with you, Du Plessis didn't really have to do much to get the stand up, but he was just in such a poor position. It's just unheard of to stand somebody up when they're in side control, or when they're in, or have your back control when you're pushing against the cage. Like, it's just unheard of to stand people up for that, even if there is like a ability. And Du Plessis is just, really not doing enough. Like, there's one thing you have to do enough to hold the position, but there's also another thing, you have to do enough and do something, right, to show the referee that you deserve to be let go of this position. And Du Plessis really did less than the minimum that is required to get a stand-up call from the referee by getting himself into a guard position. That's another thing I thought was a little bit surprising to see. So, not a good day for a lot of the UFC fans, South Africans, this weekend. I apologize to your braai. Undoubtedly, lots of leftovers for the rest of the week. So I guess you don't have to cook for the rest of the week. But this is very disappointing. And let me know your thoughts. Do you think that? I've looked at the records. Du Plessis has won matches with submission, but not really, not listed as a black belt or submission specialist, whereas Chimaev was a definite Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. You can really tell the difference. And let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching this video. I apologize, and hopefully you guys get yourself some beverage and relax a little bit before heading back to work on Monday. And thanks for watching. Cheers. Have a good one. See you guys.